Have you ever stared death in the face and come back with a divine mission? In today's video, we explore the unbelievable journey of Air Force veteran Chase Donovan, young airman whose morning routine on base collapsed into a life-ending collapse, only to awaken in a radiant garden bathed in incomparable light. There, face to face with Jesus, he was entrusted with a miraculous gift, the power to heal others through selfless love. Chase's story will challenge everything you believe about suffering, purpose, and the true nature of the human soul. Stay with us to the very end to uncover how his encounter can inspire your own transformation. And be sure to like, subscribe, and share which moment moves you most in the comments below. One fateful morning, I overslept and scrambled to get to my Air Force base on time. My supervisor, who held the master key to my dorm, let herself in expecting to catch me still in bed, but instead she found me collapsed on the floor, utterly unconscious. Within moments, the room swelled with doctors and nurses rushing in, their voices echoing like a frantic scene in a war movie. My vision flickered from side to side, every sound warped, and reality itself seemed to dissolve into fog. Then, through the chaos, a calm voice whispered from my left, "Air is going to travel up your arm. It's going to hurt fiercely, but you'll be all right." Driven by a desperate need for certainty, I forced my eyes toward that voice only, to discover no one there. Instead, my gaze fell on the heart monitor, the line flattening in stark white. In that instant, I felt my spirit lift with astonishing lightness, as though a weight had been removed from my chest. A surge of pure, blissful love washed over me, sailing me upward away from my broken body. My name is Chase Donovan, and long before that morning in the dorm, I was a child of miraculously adopted at birth by grandparents whose compassion filled their Orlando home. My mother was just 17, my father absent. Yet, I never felt abandoned because I was chosen and cherished. I grew up racing 2 Korean sisters and a Korean brother down sunlit hallways and laughing with my black brother under swaying palmettos. Only at school did I realize how unusual our family looked, and people's startled questions taught me early on that love transcends every border. I can still hear the soft hiss of the tropic traveler's tires rolling over the cracked sidewalk every time my 8 siblings and I squeezed off the bus, arms piled high with hastily wrapped candy and snack bags we'd grabbed on the way to 7-Eleven. The blistering Orlando sun scorched our skin while the scent of buttery popcorn and sweet soda mingled with old motor oil fumes drifting from parked cars. Everyone inside stared at us, the shy Korean girl tugging her dark-skinned little brother's hand, my 2 half-Korean sisters with their proud, single-lidded eyes, and my youngest brother offering only an embarrassed grin. They couldn't fathom how one family could be so racially diverse. In 7th grade, a ROTC flyer landed in my hands during biology class. I can still feel my heart pounding as I read the slogan, "Experience discipline, embrace military pride," shimmering on a mint green background. In my mind, I saw my grandfather in his silver-threaded uniform, his deep voice recounting cold nights on a Pacific island, eyes alight with pride. In that moment, I decided I had to try this for myself. On my 17th birthday, I left home with an overloaded backpack and stepped onto the drill field at Lackland Air Force Base. The Texas wind whipped my hair back and dust swirled in choking gusts at my feet. Instructors barked through whistles as the command "Run, run" echoed across the parched desert. The shrill bugle mingled with the sharp tang of sweat and sunscreen clinging to every pore. Never before had I felt the true meaning of survival until I leapt across a sandy trench and fashioned a makeshift mine from rusty wire and empty cans. When I began survival evasion resistance escape training, I waded through pine woods, slipping on oil-slick roots, my cracked lips aching so badly that each sip of stream water felt like pure gold. I learned to strip off my heavy flight suit, turn my parachute into a rain shelter, and build a fire to keep my body from freezing in 5-degree darkness. As insects whispered around me, I thought I came here to rescue pilots, but it was my own soul that was saved by the grit and faith of a soldier. Those experiences ignited in me a deep desire to serve not only my country, but the very spirit within me. I can't shake the memory of that day. It began like any other training exercise under the scorching Texas sun, but it ended up shattering everything I thought I knew about my future. I was deep into SEER training when my right knee buckled beneath me with a sickening twist. I heard the pop long before the searing pain registered. My left knee followed suit in the very next drill, as if my body had simply given up on me. I crumpled to the ground, every fiber of my uniform soaked with sweat and disbelief. My instructors rushed over, shouting for medics as I lay gasping, the dry desert air tasting like dust in my lungs. The diagnosis came swiftly in Langley's austere hospital ward. Bilateral kneecap dislocations, each one ruptured against its protective bracket. The surgeon upright, confident, his voice echoing off sterile tile, spoke of a lateral release procedure, a surgical realignment that promised to set my kneecaps back into place. He painted a picture of restored mobility, of marching through those final glorious years, ending in full salute on graduation day 57. I clung to that vision like a lifeline. I had no plan B. Recovery was a cruel tutor. The operating theater's bright lights faded into nights of agonizing pain and muffled cries. My bed became a prison, each movement a negotiation with terror. Physical therapy offered tiny victories a degree more bend, an extra footstep, but by the time I'd learned to limp without tears, my dreams lay in tatters. The surgeon's hopeful prognosis rang hollow when my joints buckled under the simplest weight. In those moments, I wasn't just a broken airman. I was a man stripped of purpose. Before the injury, my path had been crystal clear, a 20-year career in uniform, promotions spaced like proud monuments, a family proud of my stripes. My grandfather had served in World War II, my great-grandfather in the Navy during Korea. I wore their legacy on my sleeve, the ancestral echo of duty pulsing in my veins. Suddenly, I was adrift, my uniform hanging looser, my posture slumped with insecurity. I began showing up late for roll call, my boots scuffed, my salute half-hearted. The simple act of dragging myself through morning drills felt like wading through molasses. My friends noticed the change almost before I did. They cornered me in the barracks, eyes wide with concern. "Chase, you're spiraling," one said, his voice thick with frustration and sympathy. He recalled the old Chase who'd volunteered to lead every obstacle course, who had tackled every challenge with a grin. Now I barely met their eyes, my smile a brittle artifact of former days. I felt guilt carved through me, guilt for letting them down, for betraying the uniform we all held sacred, but even guilt didn't spur me to action. Instead, I sank deeper into self-doubt. Then came the official retirement notice, like a guillotine falling on my identity. My body was no longer mission capable, they said. I was fit for medical separation. That phrase echoed in my head through endless nights, a verdict I couldn't outrun. I packed my gear in a daze, fatigues, textbooks, medals I never received. Each fold of fabric reminded me of every mile I would never march. Walking away from the base gates for the last time, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The uniform that had defined me now felt like a chain I desperately needed to break. In the months that followed my discharge, I wrestled with a void so vast I could hear its echo in my own heart. Every milestone felt empty. A new apartment, civilian clothes that didn't quite fit, a job application that collected dust. I had trained for years to clear landmines, to navigate enemy territory, to survive in the world's harshest conditions, but no one had prepared me for surviving a life without direction. Looking back, I see that the fracture of my kneecaps mirrored the fracture in my spirit. Yet buried beneath the wreckage was a spark and ember of resilience refusing to die. It was the same ember that would later carry me upward through a near-death experience and back again with a mission more profound than any military campaign. But in that moment, cradled by doubt, I had no idea the journey that lay ahead. I only knew I was in freefall, and I would have to learn how to heal myself, body and soul, without a surgical stitch or a drill sergeant's command. I had never so much as sipped a drop of alcohol or experimented with drugs, and to this day I have no desire to. That made it all the more baffling when the doctors at Langley Air Force Base Hospital ran every test imaginable: blood panels, neurological scans, toxicology screens, and came up empty-handed. A young man in peak physical shape collapsing without explanation should have set off alarm bells far earlier. Instead, a weary nurse shrugged and told me they would perform a chest x-ray just to be absolutely certain. If that too came back clear, they would discharge me and send me home. The moment she adjusted my IV and stepped out of the room, the atmosphere shifted. 1 second I was lying still under the harsh fluorescent lights. The next, the ward erupted into chaos. An insistent alarm cut through the air, a shrill call to arms that jolted every awake soul into action. I felt as though I were trapped in a surreal medical thriller. The monitors began to flash red and green, the walls blurred at the edges as if I were viewing them through water. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the entire corridor must hear it. Then the doors swung open, and a regiment of doctors and nurses charged in. Their faces were etched with controlled panic, hands moved in urgent coordination. Amid their flurry, I sensed a presence at my side, someone gently resting a hand on my arm. A calm, measured voice whispered, "Air is about to travel up your arm. It will be agonizing. Trust me, you will be safe." Trusting a voice is easy when pain has robbed you of every other option. I braced myself for the worst. A searing sensation launched along my vein, as if someone had fired a silver bullet straight through my bloodstream. Each inch of my arm felt aflame. My reflexes kicked in and my legs jerked involuntarily. The pain was cataclysmic, a tidal wave of agony, but the voice remained unwavering, a steady anchor in the storm. In that excruciating moment, I understood that what I was facing was not merely a medical emergency, but a spiritual crucible. The pain, as unbearable as it was, carried an unexpected clarity. Every nerve ending, every visceral scream of my body served to strip away the illusions I had carried about what truly mattered. In that flash of agony, I glimpsed a deeper truth, that life's most profound lessons often emerge at the edge of our suffering. As my vision darkened and consciousness began to slip away, I saw the flatline cursor on the cardiac monitor and felt myself lift out of my body. It was the culmination of my fear and faith intertwining. Even as my physical form lay tethered to machines, my spirit soared free into a realm beyond pain and experience, so sublime it left the searing burn far behind. And in that timeless expanse, I knew I was destined to return not as the broken athlete or the frightened young airman, but as someone empowered to heal because I had been healed. Every detail of that day remains etched in me, unasked questions, the unreal blur of motion, the fierce promise of the calming voice. It was in those moments, on a metal gurney at Langley, that I first understood the true power of compassion, the gift of presence, and the extraordinary path that lay ahead. The agony struck without warning, a white-hot spear of pain lancing through my veins as though a locomotive were barreling beneath my skin. Each millimeter of my arm felt set ablaze, every nerve ending, screaming in protest. My right leg kicked upward in sheer reflex, toes clawing at the air, while a flurry of scrubs and masks hovered above me like frantic satellites. I heard the frantic beeping of the monitor, the clatter of instruments, urgent shouts of "clear the airway" and "get the crash cart." Yet beneath the cacophony, I perceived a soft, unwavering murmur just to my left. "This will hurt more than anything, but you're going to make it through." That calm voice defied the storm raging through my body. In all my years of military training, I had mastered stoicism, trained every fiber of my being to withstand hardship, but nothing could have prepared me for the crushing weight of an air embolism racing toward my heart. Still, That gentle assurance brushed against me like a cool breeze, steady and real, reminding me to breathe, even as my lungs fought to expand. I wanted to turn and see who stood there, offering comfort when I needed it most. I longed to reach out, to grasp that hand stroking my arm, but my head felt heavy, vision blurring at the edges. Then the monitors hit silence. In the blink of an eye, my pulse vanished. My world shuddered into darkness, and the last echo of the alarm faded. In that suspended moment, more profound than any blackout, my consciousness rose free of pain, as if my spirit poured through a tunnel of glowing light. An indescribable serenity washed over me, a boundless, tender love that smoothed away every trace of suffering. I felt weightless, my body unbound, drifting toward a beauty beyond words where fear and agony could not follow. Even now, recalling that ascent sends shivers down my spine, the pure release, the overwhelming sense that I was inexplicably, ineffably safe. I felt weightless, as though every atom of my being had dissolved into pure light and love. That sensation of freedom was unlike anything I've ever known, an ecstatic, blissful embrace that seemed to cradle me from the inside out. I could have floated in that radiance forever. There was no fear, no resistance, only an overwhelming sense of trust, as if I were being guided by an unseen hand into something indescribably beautiful. I surrendered entirely, convinced that wherever I was headed would exceed even this perfection. Moments later, I found myself standing at the edge of a garden so lush and vibrant it defied earthly comparison. Exotic flowers bowed beneath their own brilliance, petals shimmering in colors more vivid than any sunset I'd witnessed in Orlando. Leaves pulsed with energy, their edges glowing as if carved from living gemstones. The air itself felt alive, humming with a gentle warmth that reminded me of Psalm 23, where David writes, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows." Here, my cup truly overflowed with awe and peace. In my childhood, I had imagined Elvis Presley waiting in satin jumpsuit, welcoming me with that gentle, iconic smile. But this was far more real than any dream. Instead of clouds, I walked on soft grass that felt like silk beneath my bare feet. Instead of distant choirs, I heard a symphony of rustling leaves and a chorus of birds whose songs I could not name, yet understood perfectly. It reminded me of the way Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, described finding meaning even in suffering here. Meaning was all around me, pulsing through every living thing. As I wandered deeper, I sensed an invitation to lay down every burden I'd carried. My fears about failure, regret over lost opportunities, shame from past mistakes. In that moment, I realized that this garden was not merely a place, but a revelation of my true self, untethered from doubt, fully aligned with love. I understood that the light I felt was not distant or separate. It was the truest part of who I am. When a figure appeared ahead, clad not in modern clothes but in simple, flowing robes, it was not Elvis but an even more familiar presence. His eyes shone with an intensity that spoke of infinite compassion. Though I had no words, I felt every message conveyed in a single glance, that I was cherished beyond measure and that my life on earth still held purpose. In that garden, fear melted away and was replaced by a fierce longing to return, to share this love with everyone I'd ever known. And then, as softly as a breath, the garden began to fade, and I felt the gentle pull of gravity. I knew I was being brought back not to the ordinary world, but to a life forever transformed by the memory of that boundless love. I remember bending down to touch the soil beneath my feet in that otherworldly garden. Back on Earth, I would never set foot in dirt barefoot without flinching, but there, I could feel every tiny grain sliding between my toes, cool and reassuring. It struck me as unbelievably vivid, far beyond any dream where you merely imagine sensations. There, I truly felt the life pulsing through the ground itself. Ahead of me, a small boy darted across a path woven from blossoms and sunlight, his curly blonde hair catching the light so brightly it looked almost golden. He laughed as he ran, glancing back over his shoulder with mischievous delight. To anyone else, it would have been an endearing father-son moment, a scene lifted from a pastoral painting. Then the boy paused, and suddenly I realized it was me, my own child self, entirely free and radiant. In that instant, I remembered what it felt like to be truly happy without a single care. As he tucked his little hand into that of the tall figure beside him, I took in the man's gentle presence. He wore simple robes, yet his posture spoke of infinite strength and kindness. His eyes locked on the boy with a warmth that seemed to fill the entire garden. The way he guided my younger self reminded me of Jesus' invitation in Matthew 18:3 to become like little children to enter the kingdom of heaven. Here was the embodiment of that promise's pure love, free from judgment, inviting me back to the simple joy I had lost. Watching them move together, I felt waves of bittersweet nostalgia wash over me. I had spent so much of my 19 years consumed by uniforms, drill sergeants, ranks, and regulations, believing adulthood meant leaving innocence behind. Yet here, in this moment beyond time, I saw that nothing I'd gained, no medal, no career milestone could compare to the unguarded laughter of my childhood. I realized I had forgotten how to play, how to trust, how to let my heart run ahead of my mind and simply delight in being alive. That vision reshaped everything. Just as the prophet Isaiah spoke of God making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland, Isaiah 43:19. This encounter carved a path from my weary adult self back to the boundless joy I once knew. It taught me that I carry that child within me still, waiting to be rediscovered. As the garden gently faded and I felt myself drawn back toward my body, I carried that memory in my bones. The feel of warm earth beneath delicate feet, the sound of infectious laughter, and the certainty that I was, and always would be, that happy child under the sun. That realization became a beacon for my life on earth, a reminder to nurture wonder, to cherish play, and to honor the innocence that first taught me what it means to truly live. I watched in wonder as the man beside my childhood self paused and turned toward me. In that moment, I felt an undeniable certainty. This was Jesus, though he did not fit the Hollywood stereotype. His hair was short and chestnut brown, his eyes a vivid green that seemed to see straight into my soul, and his smile radiated warmth like sunrise breaking through a storm. I expected long flowing locks or a distant solemnity, but here he stood in simple robes, every inch the embodiment of peace and strength. As surely as I know my own reflection in a mirror, I knew it was him. No question lingered in my mind. In his gaze, I felt the echo of Psalm 34:5. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. He smiled again, and in that silent exchange, I received a wordless lesson. Your life's true purpose is to spread light, love, and laughter. It was both a reminder and a gentle rebuke. Though I had walked this earth many times before, I had forgotten the simplest truth. Joy is a gift meant to be shared. In the Air Force uniform I wore, I had believed my destiny was defined by rank, by salary, by the next promotion. I had trained, sacrificed, and planned for a future that suddenly felt hollow. But standing there in that timeless garden, I understood that none of those things mattered if I did not bring joy to others. It mirrored the teaching of Jesus in John 13:35. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. I realized I had been taking life far too seriously, neglecting the laughter tucked into every sunrise. Time held still around us. I cannot say whether we stood together for minutes or hours, only that every second felt both fleeting and eternal. His presence wrapped around me like a warm blanket, restoring a knowing I had buried beneath my burdens. Life's greatest calling is to kindle hope in others through simple acts of kindness and moments of shared delight. Then, with a knowing nod as easy as a father bidding farewell, he turned and faded into the brilliance beyond. I awoke back in my body, carrying that lesson in my heart forever changed, determined to live not for accolades or paychecks, but to serve the world with light, love, and laughter. He winked at me, that gentle grin lingering as he quipped, "You know you have to go back." His tone carried the warmth of an old friend teasing me after a long visit, and I found myself smiling as I replied, "I know." In that moment, I understood he wasn't sending me away in sorrow, but in purpose. It dawned on me that I had wandered these heavenly halls before, perhaps not as dramatically as when my heart stopped beating, but countless times in spirit when prayer lifted me above earthly worries. He chuckled softly, as if recalling a shared joke, and reminded me that no soul is meant to linger forever in that realm. "You can't stick around here too long," he said, voice rich with compassion. "There's work waiting for you down below." I nodded, feeling a peaceful acceptance settle into every fiber of my being. It was like saying goodbye to a beloved mentor, confident that we would meet again. There was no clinging, no fear, only a calm assurance that my true journey lay ahead. Slowly, I felt myself drifting back, as if being guided by an invisible hand. The brilliant colors of the garden dimmed to the cool fluorescence of the hospital room. I awoke in Hampton, Virginia, far from the base where I had fallen. I blinked against the unfamiliar ceiling tiles, convinced at first that I might still be dreaming, closing my eyes to return to that place of light, then opening them again to find myself truly alive. In that instant, I realized the greatest gift of that visit to the other side was not the peace I felt there, but the fire it sparked within me to live fully here, sharing every ounce of hope and healing I had been shown. I forced my heavy eyelids open and blinked against the harsh hospital lights. My body felt astonishingly holding no pressure in my chest, no ache where the defibrillator paddles had pressed. Yet everything else was wrong. I was lying in a crisp white bed in Hampton, Virginia, not in the cramped dorm infirmary on base. Through the half-open door, I could see civilian scrubs instead of camouflage, and the steady hum of car traffic instead of fighter jets overhead. A nurse burst in, eyes wide, nearly colliding with the footboard. I croaked, "Hello?" Her face twisted with alarm as she backed out and sprinted down the corridor. Moments later, a doctor, tie askew and stethoscope swinging, hurried in. He scanned my chart, then met my gaze and shrugged. "This is beyond me," he admitted. "You flatline, come back, and now, well, you'll be going back to the Air Force. They'll decide what happens next." Stunned, I reached for my phone and dialed my oldest friend. "I kind of died," I whispered. "Can you pick me up?" He didn't hesitate. Soon I was bundled into his car, the sting of disbelief still fresh, my left arm wrapped in a soft sleeve hiding the angry, bruised black track where air had coursed toward my heart. We pulled into the nearest Chick-fil-A because, of course, nothing cures existential shock like waffle fries, and I devoured chicken nuggets until my convictions returned. "I need to clear my head," I told him, voice thick with confusion and wonder. So we set off for Washington, D.C., weaving past the Lincoln Memorial, my camera dangling from my neck. Each monument felt strangely familiar, as if I had stood before them in another life. In the soft glow of dusk, we paused at the reflecting pool. I gazed at my bruised arm, tracing the outlines of that invisible bullet of air, and realized that the world I'd feared had collapsed, was still spinning beneath me. Death had taught me two truths that day. First, life is more fragile than I ever imagined. And second, every sunrise carries a promise. As I pressed my palm against the cold marble of the Jefferson Memorial, I vowed to honor that gift, to live with courage, to love without reserve, and to share the healing I had been shown with anyone who needed it. I returned to the hospital a week later, driven by the dark bruise creeping up my arm and a desperate need to understand what had nearly killed me. The purple and blue stain still stretched from my wrist to just below my elbow, reminding me of that moment when life slipped through my fingers. Nurses guided me to a quiet exam room and diligently charted every detail. Finally, the attending physician read aloud their findings. I had suffered an air embolism, a bubble of air that had somehow snuck through my IV line, coursed up my veins, and stopped my heart cold. He explained that in his career, no matter how many crises he'd witnessed, he had never seen a patient survive a full cardiac flatline caused by an embolism. The words "mistaken for a line" and "miraculous recovery" felt surreal in his professional mouth. I imagined the scene in a Matthew 8:26 moment when Jesus stilled the storm with a single command. I, too, had been calmed in the middle of chaos, rescued against all odds. Yet none of the medical staff seemed to know how to reconcile the textbook explanation with my continued existence. They offered apologies for the error, then swiftly moved on to other emergencies without pausing to discuss the deeper mystery: how I had walked back from death's door. In the days that followed, I felt a profound tension between relief and isolation. Physically, I healed. Emotionally, I recoiled. I carried the bruise as a secret talisman, fearful that if I shared my story, if I spoke of flatlines and disembodied voices, friends and strangers would dismiss me as delusional. At the time, I had never heard the term near-death experience, so there was no language to frame what I'd lived through. My silence grew as thick as the stain on my arm, and I confided only in those I trusted most. Navigating this new reality became my hidden struggle. Each day I wondered whether to speak the truth of what had transpired or to bury it with the memory of that sudden, inexplicable flatlinean angel's warning I could neither fully grasp nor fully share. Within days of returning home, I felt an urgent restlessness stirring in my bones. By the 8th of July 2008, I had signed my retirement papers and walked away from 2 decades in uniform. Almost overnight, my life blossomed into a kaleidoscope of new experiences. I leapt into a breakdancing troupe at a nearby university, though I'd never set foot on campus before. I braved open mic nights doing stand-up comedy and laughed until my sides ached. I picked up a camera and shot wedding after wedding, capturing moments of pure joy. I learned to glide across the dance floor as a ballroom instructor, twirling strangers into lighthearted abandon. It was as if Peter's chains had fallen away on the Damascus Road and every hidden longing took flight. I hosted celebrity talent shows, nodded at television crews, even lent my booming voice to Norfolk's baseball and hockey arenas for a couple of seasons. I felt charged by purpose, spreading light and laughter exactly as I had been shown to do. Yet soon, a familiar whisper crept in. Grow up, get serious, find a real job. So I accepted a polished corner office at a local radio station. The paycheck was steady and the benefits generous, but something inside me began to shrivel. I paid the mortgage, drove the nice car, but with every board meeting I attended, I felt guilty for abandoning the mission I had been given. Psalm 118-24 reminded me, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Yet I traded daily joy for quarterly reports. In that moment, I realized that true maturity does not demand sacrificing our childlike wonder. Like C.S. Lewis, who warned us not to let our little candle be snuffed out in the black winds of the world, I vowed to reclaim my laughter, rebuild memories for others, and honor the calling to serve my soul and my community with unbridled passion. When I first signed up for that 5-day retreat, I pictured yet another checkbox on my post-military resume of trends, doing yoga, meditation, maybe sharing a few beers at night. I couldn't have been more wrong. We arrived at a secluded ranch just outside Fredericksburg, Texas, fields stretching golden under the late afternoon sun, the smell of cedar and sage drifting through the air. 30 battle-scarred men in uniform, each carrying memories heavier than any rucksack, filed into the large canvas tent that would be our sanctuary. I'd never meditated in my life, and the idea of downward dog and combat boots felt absurd. But within the first hour, I realized this was exactly where I needed to be. Our mornings began before dawn, shivering in a thin layer of mist. The world still hushed except for the occasional call of a distant hawk. A soft-spoken instructor led us through breathing exercises that felt like a lifeline. Each inhale drawing in forgiveness, each exhale releasing the weight of old orders and old regrets. I remember Jesus withdrawing into the wilderness for 40 days alone, vulnerable, yet returning stronger to his purpose. Matthew 4:1, -4. In those moments, I understood what had drawn him there. The need to strip away every disguise, every armor, plating of pride, until only truth remained. By midday, we practiced yoga beneath towering oak trees, their branches sheltering us like the arms of God in Psalm 91. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. I watched fellow veterans men who once ducked mortar fire hesitantly, mirror warrior 2 in triangle pose, their stiff muscles gradually softening into fluid grace. As I held extended side angle, I felt the tension drain from my shoulders, a physical echo of the spiritual release I'd been yearning for ever since my near-death moments. Evenings were the most powerful. We gathered around a crackling fire pit, the embers dancing like tiny prayers against the dark sky. One by one, we shared our stories, some recounting battlefield losses, others confessing the guilt of surviving when brothers did not. When it was my turn, I spoke of flatlining on base, of that calm voice assuring me the pain would pass, of those precious seconds in the Garden of Heaven. I watched hardened faces soften, tears glistening in the flickering light. It reminded me of J.R. Martinez, the burned Army soldier turned motivational speaker, who credits yoga and meditation with saving his life after his IED injuries. Like him, I realized healing wasn't just physical, it was the mind and the spirit learning to trust again. By the 5th day, I hardly recognized the man who'd arrived. My wife's words on my return rang in my ears. "You seem like a different person, happier than I've ever seen." It wasn't a fleeting comment, it was a deep-rooted peace that flowed from my chest to my fingertips. I could feel my heart beating not out of fear, but out of purpose. I understood now that my gifts, intuition, empathy, laughter were not curiosities but callings, to step into the world as a healer of souls, just as Jesus healed on the shores of Galilee. If you've ever felt the tug of something more, the whisper that you're meant for greater than the grind of the daily routine, remember this: sometimes the greatest battlefield we face is the one within. Like the warrior who surrenders his sword to receive new strength, we too must surrender our doubts on the mat of transformation. Brothers and sisters, let this be your call to action. Breathe in courage, exhale regret, and take that first step into the vast wilderness of your own heart. I felt an urgent calling deep in my chest, a conviction that when someone's sorrow drew near, I was meant to stand between their pain and peace. I remember the day my grandmother was admitted to the hospital. As the report of her condition reached me, I pressed my palms against my heart and whispered a simple plea for relief. In that moment, warm currents of energy surged through my hands, tingling like gentle sparks of hope. When I looked down, faint burnished marks had formed across both palms, mystical sigils reminding me of Isaiah's promise that, by his wounds we are healed. Isaiah 53:5. My first instinct was to dismiss them as an allergic rash, the sort of thing that might flare up from an IV line. Yet those marks appeared only when I had laid hands on a loved one's distress and vanished as soon as I stepped away. Concerned friends cautioned, "You can't carry everyone's suffering, that burden isn't yours alone." Their words echoed Paul's instruction in Galatians to carry one another's burdens, yet not become engulfed by them. Galatians 6:2. Slowly, I learned to pray with gratitude rather than absorb every wound, to intercede with compassion but let divine grace enact the final healing. Still, each evening when I close my eyes and raise my hands in prayer, I feel that same gentle warmth pulsing through my skin. I remember the day I laid that gift beside a stranger in the airport lounge, praying for their loneliness to lift, and saw real tears of relief soften their eyes. Like the Good Samaritan who bound wounds he could not bear alone, I now offer love as my medicine, knowing that true healing flows not from forcing miracles, but from standing as a conduit of God's compassion. In that sacred balance of giving without overreaching, I have discovered my purpose: to reflect the light of Christ to every soul I meet, one whispered prayer and one gentle touch at a time. Sometimes when I reached out to ease someone's burden, I'd feel a soft, almost weightless warmth pooling in my palms like sunlight condensed into a tangible substance. It never hurt, quite the opposite. It felt like a quiet blessing flowing through me. I remember one flight when the cabin was enveloped in hushed stillness and I could not sleep. Without conscious thought, I pressed my hands to my chest and whispered a prayer for the elderly woman across the aisle who sat hunched over, tears glistening in her eyes. Instantly, a gentle rush of energy lifted in my core and spread through my fingertips. And I knew in that moment it was Jesus once more guiding me. His voice came not through my ears, but through a deep inner certainty. You are on the right path, but remember to care for your own spirit. If you pour out every drop of your life force for others, you will have none left to give. You must let people walk their own trials, for some lessons can only be learned through pain. Those words struck me like thunderclap, profound, yet loving, reminding me of the apostles' struggles when Jesus cautioned Peter, "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." Matthew 26-41. I realized then that compassion does not mean swallowing every sorrow. It means offering hope and guiding others to rise. Learning to balance my gift of healing with boundaries has become my new mission. I still feel that warm inner, perhaps the same divine spark that anointed David in the fields before he faced Goliath flow whenever I choose to serve without overstepping someone's journey. In our fractured world, where loneliness plagues crowded streets and screens, we hold the power to restore connection simply by breathing gratitude, uttering sincere prayers, sharing smiles that cost us nothing, yet return riches. Like the Good Samaritan who tended wounds but allowed the injured man to walk under his own strength, Luke 10:34, I have learned to stand alongside those in pain, offering solace and a hand to raise them, then stepping back so they may claim their own healing. It is a delicate dance of love-taking, up the mantle of compassion, yet never usurping another's right to grow through hardship. In this balance, I have discovered new joy, a life of laughter and light, where every breath is an invitation to grace. At times when I reached out to soothe someone else's suffering, pressing a hand to a trembling shoulder, murmuring words of comfort, I discovered that the healing energy flowing through my palms was nothing like the searing pain of that air embolism. Instead, it was a soft, luminous warmth, a gentle current that pulsed beneath my skin and seemed to whisper reassurance to my very soul. I first noticed it high above the clouds on a cross-country flight. The cabin was hushed, every passenger lost in their own private world, and I struggled to find sleep amid the rattling engines and stale recycled air. Then something inside me tightened, an undeniable presence pressing into my chest so vividly. I felt it as a caress of light, and I knew without question that it was Jesus himself standing beside me once more. He spoke wordlessly, but unmistakably. You are walking the right road, but pause sometimes to recharge. If you drain yourself, how will you help anyone else? I remember thinking of Galatians 6:2, where scripture bids us bear one another's burdens, and yet here was a divine reminder that bearing others' pain does not mean carrying it all yourself. He showed me that true compassion includes wisdom, that sometimes the greatest gift we can give is the space for someone to endure their own trial, to grow through their own struggle. That lesson cut deep. Like Mother Teresa, who served the poorest of the poor, yet knew when to return to retreat in prayer, I realized that my gifts were meant to empower, not to exhaust me. In the weeks since, I felt the pull of that healing fire in my hands only when someone's heart truly ached nearby. Each time it sparks, I place a gentle boundary. Here is love, here is light, but their journey is theirs alone. It's not a burden, but an honor to channel this grace. Yet I also let myself rest, remembering Jesus' example in Mark 6:31, when he invited the disciples away to a quiet place to rest a while. We live in a world fractured by isolation and fear, but we hold simple free keys to unity: a shared breath, a heartfelt prayer, a moment of genuine laughter. We can heal one another and still protect our own flame, so that our light never dims. And in doing so, we learn that even our wounds can become wells of compassion, inviting others to draw from the same living water that sustains us all.